Jessica Burlew. She was 16 years old, homeless, and had been receiving psychiatric treatment since the age of 4. The man she took the life of was 27 years her senior, and the circumstances surrounding his passing would leave prosecutors, defense attorneys, and a judge grappling with questions that had no clean answers. Jessica Burlew was born in approximately 1997 in Arizona. Her childhood was defined by instability from the start. Her mother, Tracy Woodside, was wheelchair-bound following a car accident. Jessica was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and autism at an early age, conditions that would follow her through a revolving door of Department of Child Safety group homes, special education programs, and psychiatric facilities. She had a severe history of self-mutilation. By October of 2013, 3 months before the incident that would change everything, she had run away from a CPS group home. She was technically homeless. She was also 16 years old. The man at the center of this case was Jason Ash, age 43, of Phoenix. According to his mother, Ash was on the autism spectrum himself, though never formally diagnosed, and he struggled with social interactions and employment throughout his life. He and Burlew met online. Ash lied about his age, initially claiming to be 26, then 28. In reality, he was old enough to be her father. On January 18, 2014, the day after Burlew turned 17, Jason Ash lost his life inside Tracy Woodside's apartment in Glendale, Arizona. According to Burlew's account to police, which forensic evidence would later support, Ash had asked her to choke him during a sexual act using an electrical cord. There was supposed to be a safe word. Burlew strangled Ash with the cord, but he never said it. When she realized he was unresponsive, she began cutting his body with a razor blade. First, she claimed, to try to get a reaction. Then she continued cutting, a pattern consistent with her documented history of self-harm. Ash was found with the electrical cord around his neck, his pants undone, and knife wounds on his face, arms, and genital area. Burlew called her mother. Her mother called 911. Burlew fled the scene but returned hours later. A police officer spotted her entering the apartment wearing a hooded robe. She opened the door when officers knocked and was taken into custody. On her phone, investigators discovered a 4-minute video showing her cutting Ash. What responsibility does a mentally ill, homeless teenager bear for the passing of a man nearly 3 decades older who had lied about his age and placed her in that situation? She was charged as an adult with second-degree homicide under Arizona law, which requires juveniles 15 and older accused of violent felonies to be tried as adults. For 10 months, she was found mentally incompetent to stand trial. During that time, she was held in 23-hour solitary confinement at Estrella Women's Jail. In November of 2014, she was finally deemed competent. On September 4, 2015, Burlew pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree taking of life in exchange for a 10-year sentence, the minimum for the charge. Prosecutor Jay Rademacher argued she was engaged in adult activities and needed adult consequences. He disputed the characterization of Ash as a predator, stating that text messages showed Ash seemed like a little puppy dog. Public defender Ashley Meyer countered with 7 mitigating factors, including Burlew's age, her mental health diagnoses, the 27-year age gap between her and Ash, and the fact that the death was not premeditated. On October 20, 2015, Judge Scott McCoy of Maricopa County Superior Court sentenced her to 10 years in Arizona State Prison, with 644 days credit for time served. The judge acknowledged the considerable amount of mitigating factors and stated that they justified reducing the sentence to the minimum. Under Arizona's truth in sentencing provision for dangerous offenses, 100% of the sentence must be served. Based on that math, Burlew would have been eligible for release in approximately early 2024. As of 2025, no news coverage of her release or continued incarceration has been located. She would now be approximately 27 or 28 years old. Jessica Burlew's case sits in uncomfortable territory, a teenager with severe mental illness, a much older man who deceived her, and a death that defied simple categorization. But the case that follows leaves no such ambiguity. It remains one of the most harrowing acts of violence ever committed by teenage girls in American history. Hope Rippey. 4 teenage girls, one 12-year-old victim, a night of torture that lasted hours. And when it was over, all 4 of them went to McDonald's for breakfast. Hope Anna Rippey was born on June 9, 1976, in Madison, Indiana. Her parents divorced in 1984 when she was 7. She moved with her mother and siblings to Quincy, Michigan, for 3 years before the family reconciled and returned to Madison. Her older brothers were described as violent, and Hope learned to be tough. She began self-harming at 15. At the time of the offense, she was 15 years old. The victim was Shanda Renee Scherer, age 12, born June 6, 1979. In Pineville, Kentucky, Shanda had only moved to the area in January of 1992. She was in 8th grade. The catalyst for what happened was jealousy. Melinda Lovelace, 16, had been in a romantic relationship with another girl, 14-year-old Amanda Hevron. When Shanda became romantically involved with Amanda, Lovelace fixated on her. She showed a knife to the others and said she intended to scare Shanda. On the night of January 10, 1992, Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence, both 15, went to Shanda's father's house and introduced themselves as friends of Amanda. They told Shanda that Amanda was waiting at a place called the Witch's Castle. Shanda got in the car. Lovelace was hiding under a blanket with a knife. Once Shanda was inside, Lovelace sprang out and put the blade to her throat. What followed over the next several hours defies comprehension. Rippey took Shanda's Mickey Mouse watch and danced to its tune. At the Witch's Castle, they bound her arms and legs. Lovelace and Lori Tackett, 17, beat Shanda, attempted to slash her throat with a knife that was too dull, and stabbed her in the chest. Rippey came out of the car and held Shanda down while she was stabbed and strangled. When Shanda screamed from the trunk where they had placed her, Tackett went out and inflicted more wounds. She later beat her with a tire iron and sexually assaulted her with it. Before dawn, Rippey sprayed Shanda with Windex and taunted her. "You're not looking so hot now, are you?" At sunrise, they bought gasoline. They drove to a rural location near Jefferson Proving Ground, a place Rippey had suggested. Rippey poured gasoline on Shanda, who was still alive. They set her on fire. Shanda Scherer passed from smoke inhalation and burns. Her body was found that morning by hunters. But here is what makes this case even more disturbing. That same evening, at 8:20 p.m. on January 11, 1992, Tony Lawrence and Hope Rippey went to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office with their parents and gave statements. On March 15, 1992, all 4 were charged with taking a life, arson, battery with a deadly weapon, aggravated battery, criminal confinement, and intimidation. Rippey pleaded guilty to felony charges of ending a life, arson, and criminal confinement before Judge John Jourdan. At her plea hearing, she admitted her role: luring Shanda, participating in the torture, pouring the gasoline, setting Shanda on fire. Judge Jourdan sentenced Rippey to the maximum of 60 years, but suspended 10 years for mitigating circumstances, resulting in an effective 50-year sentence with 10 years of medium supervision probation upon release. The judge stated that Hope Rippey had choices. There were avenues of escape, ways to help herself, ways to help Shanda. She poured the gasoline so no one would get caught, even though she knew it would end Shanda's life. Her lack of mercy, the judge said, is a horrifying lesson to us all. In 2004, Indiana Superior Court Judge Jenny Manier reduced Rippey's sentence from 50 to 35 years, finding Rippey was remorseful and likely to be productive. The factors cited included a bachelor's degree from Ball State University, a GED, training seeing eye dogs, and speaking to youth groups. This changed her earliest release date from 2017 to 2006. Hope Rippey was released on April 28, 2006, at age 29, after serving approximately 14 years. She completed supervised parole in April of 2011. As of 2025, she lives in the Indianapolis area under her middle name Anna, with her wife. She appeared on the Dr. Phil show in 2011, where she was confronted by Shanda's mother. All 4 perpetrators are now free. Lawrence was released in 2000, Tackett in 2018, Loveless in 2019. Rippey served 14 years for her role in one of the most brutal crimes ever committed by teenage girls. The next case involves a teenager who served no time at all before committing an act of random violence that would take the life of a complete stranger. Eliza Wozni. She walked through a 24-hour Walmart carrying a hunting knife and a machete she had just taken from a display. A security guard stood 10 to 15 feet from the exit. No one stopped her. No one called police. 45 minutes later, a man would be fatally harmed in his own car. Eliza Wozni was born approximately December 18, 2000. She was 16 years old at the time of the offense. She lived on the northwest side of Chicago and was a former student at Taft High School before attending a therapeutic day school, suggesting pre-existing mental or behavioral health issues. Very little biographical information about her family has been released publicly. She had no prior history of violence. The victim was Grant T. Nelson, age 34, of Wilmette, Illinois. A 2001 New Trier High School graduate who attended the University of Colorado at Boulder, Nelson worked as an Uber driver and waiter. Friends and family described him as a gentle soul and a kind soul in a cruel world. On May 30th, 2017, Memorial Day weekend, Eliza Wozni ordered 3 separate Uber rides over the course of several hours. The first picked her up in the Elmwood Park neighborhood at approximately 1:25 a.m. and dropped her at Des Plaines train station. The second dropped her at a 24-hour Walmart on West Touhy Avenue in Skokie at approximately 2:30 a.m. Inside the Walmart, surveillance footage captured Wozni walking through the store, holding a hunting knife and machete she had taken from a display. She exited without paying. A security guard and Walmart employee stood just feet from the exit. They did not stop her. After she left, multiple staff gathered near the door. One said, "She's by Touhy, walking with a knife." No one called police. At 3:18 a.m., Wozni ordered a third Uber ride. Grant Nelson, who had just finished a Memorial Day dinner with his family, accepted the request. He picked her up in his gray 2014 Hyundai Sonata. Approximately 2 minutes after pickup, from behind the driver's seat, Wozni began attacking Nelson with the machete and knife. Nelson escaped the vehicle, bleeding from at least half a dozen wounds, shouting, help me, I'm going to die!" He made his way to a nearby apartment building, pressing door buzzers. Wozni climbed into the front seat, drove away, struck a median, then fled on foot, shedding a blood-stained Cubs t-shirt. Officers arrived within 4 minutes and found Nelson lying on the grass. He described his attacker before being transported to St. Francis Hospital in Evanston, where he passed away. Police found Wozni hiding behind an air conditioning unit at a nearby office building, still holding the knife and machete. She refused to drop the weapons and was tased. She declined to give a statement. Why did she do it? What possible motive could a 16-year-old girl have for fatally harming a complete stranger who had done nothing more than accept her ride request? No motive was ever determined. Prosecutors called it heinous and not provoked in any manner. The judge called it a random act of violence. Wozni was charged as an adult with first-degree taking of life and held without bail. While in custody at Cook County Juvenile Detention Center, she accumulated over 450 disciplinary violations. These included attacks on guards and detainees, self-harm requiring at least 6 hospitalizations, expressed desire for a killing spree, and using her own blood to write "die" on a wall. In December of 2018, Judge Lauren Edidin ordered Wasney transferred to adult Cook County Jail upon turning 18. On August 24, 2020, Wasney pleaded guilty to first-degree taking of life before Cook County Judge Timothy Chambers at the Skokie Courthouse. She was sentenced to 27 years in Illinois State Prison, with 3 years of mandatory supervised release following release. Under Illinois's truth in sentencing provision for first-degree offenses committed after June 19, 1998, 100% of the sentence must be served. There is no early release. Wasney will remain in prison until approximately 2044, when she will be 44 years old. As of 2025, no appeals have been publicly reported. Wasney remains incarcerated in the Illinois Department of Corrections system, most likely at Logan Correctional Center given her behavioral history. The Nelson family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Walmart, the security companies, Uber, and a behavioral hospital. The outcome has not been publicly reported. Grant Nelson's life ended because he accepted a ride request. The next case involves a young woman who was behind the wheel herself and the question of whether she used her car as a weapon. Mackenzie Shirilla. She was 17 years old. Her boyfriend was in the passenger seat. Their friend was in the back. And according to the event data recorder in her 2018 Toyota Camry, she pushed the accelerator to full capacity, reached approximately 100 miles per hour, and never touched the brake. Mackenzie F. Shirilla was born August 2, 2004. She lived in Strongsville, Ohio, a Cleveland suburb, and was a recent graduate of Strongsville High School. She had been diagnosed with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, known as POTS. She had been dating her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, for approximately 3 to 4 years in what was described as a tumultuous on and off relationship. Russo's family testified that Shirilla spent a majority of the relationship living at Russo's home and that there were frequent fights and threats. On Sunday, July 31, 2022, at approximately 5:30 a.m., Mackenzie Shirilla was driving her Toyota Camry with 20-year-old Dominic Russo in the passenger seat and 19-year-old Davion Flanagan, a friend who had been planning to attend barber school, in the back. After turning onto Progress Drive in Strongsville, she accelerated. The event data recorder, the car's black box, showed the accelerator pedal was pushed to full capacity with no application of the brake. The gear shift was briefly moved to neutral but was manually moved back to drive seconds before impact. The car drove through a business sign and directly into the brick wall of the Plidco building, a commercial structure. Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan were pronounced deceased at the scene. Shirilla was hospitalized with multiple broken bones and abnormally low blood oxygen at 82%. Psilocybin mushrooms and a digital scale were found in the wreckage. But investigators discovered something else. 2 weeks before the crash, on July 17, 2022, a family friend of the Russos witnessed Shirilla screaming during an argument with Russo. The words she screamed were, "I'm going to wreck this car right now." Cell phone records also showed Shirilla's phone had been in the area of the crash site in the days prior, suggesting she may have scouted the location. Did Mackenzie Shirilla deliberately drive her car into a brick wall at 100 miles per hour to end a toxic relationship by ending the lives of everyone inside? She was arrested on November 4, 2022, after hospital discharge and charged with 17 counts, later consolidated to 12. The final charges included 4 counts of taking a life, 4 counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of aggravated vehicular homicide, 1 count of drug possession, and 1 count of possessing criminal tools. The case was a bench trial before Cuyahoga County Judge Nancy Margaret Russo. On August 14, 2023, Judge Russo found Sherilla guilty on all 12 counts. Her statement was widely reported. This was not reckless driving. This was taking lives. She added, "She morphs from a responsible driver to literal hell on wheels." She had a mission, and she executed it with precision. Mackenzie decided death was the ultimate goal that day. On August 21, 2023, Sherilla was sentenced to life in prison with first parole eligibility after 15 years, 2 concurrent life sentences for the charges related to taking lives, plus concurrent terms for other counts, and permanent driver's license suspension. She received credit for 301 days served. At sentencing, Sherilla stated, "I am so deeply sorry. I hope one day you can see how I'd never let this happen or do it on purpose." Dominic's father publicly stated he didn't support Sherilla spending her life behind bars, saying he didn't want the rest of her life ruined too. Sherilla's appellate efforts have been unsuccessful. She filed a direct appeal in September of 2023 to the 8th District Court of Appeals, which upheld the conviction in September of 2024. In February of 2025, her attorneys sought review by the Ohio Supreme Court, which declined to accept jurisdiction. A post-conviction relief petition filed in October of 2024 was one day past the statutory deadline due to a leap year miscalculation. A supplemental petition filed in April of 2025 introduced an affidavit from a neurologist stating evidence was consistent with loss of consciousness. Judge Nancy Margaret Russo dismissed the petition in May of 2025 as untimely, without ruling on the merits. As of 2025, Mackenzie Sherilla is incarcerated at Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville, Ohio. Her first parole hearing is expected approximately September of 2037 or 2038. She is currently 20 years old. The next case also involves a group of teenagers and a death that prosecutors argued was deliberate. But what happened in a Pennsylvania woodland in 1998 would take years and a United States Supreme Court ruling to fully resolve. Jessica Holtmeyer. 7 teenagers gathered in the woods on Mother's Day. They fashioned a noose from stolen rope and hung it from a tree. They called it an initiation ritual. One of them, a 15-year-old girl with a learning disability who had only moved to town 4 months earlier, would not survive it. Jessica Nicole Holtmeyer was born March 1, 1982, in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania. She was 16 years old at the time of the offense. Born when her mother was 17, she was raised primarily by her grandparents and had little contact with her mother. She was sexually assaulted at age 5 by a neighborhood boy. Despite being described as highly intelligent, she struggled socially and did poorly in school. Her boyfriend was Aaron Straw, 18, described as homeless, whom a psychologist would later testify controlled her through extreme traumatization. The victim was Kimberly Jo Dotz, known as Kimmy, age 15, an 8th grader who had moved to Curwensville, Pennsylvania, in January of 1998. She was overweight, had a learning disability, and was a frequent target of bullying. A group of teens calling themselves the Runaways had planned to flee to Florida that weekend. The group included Holtmeyer, Straw, Dawn Laniger, who was 14, and several others. After stealing and crashing a car, the group walked to camping trailers at a location known as Gallows Harbor, where they looted supplies. On Mother's Day, May 10, 1998, while waiting for a ride, the group fashioned a noose from stolen rope and hung it from a tree. They called it a dangerous initiation ritual. Each member allegedly took turns with the noose. When Dotz placed the noose around her neck, Holtmeyer and Straw would not let her remove it. She was pulled off the ground for 20 to 30 seconds while crying. After a pause caused by passing vehicles, Straw, Holtmeyer, and another girl coaxed Dots back into the noose. On the second hanging, Dots was suspended until she convulsed and lost consciousness. Straw threw a log on her stomach and attempted to burn the noose off. According to witnesses, Holtmeyer then picked up a basketball-sized rock and struck Dots in the face at least twice. The group hid the body under branches and leaves. It was discovered 9 days later, on May 19, 1998. How does a 16-year-old girl come to pick up a rock and use it to end the life of a classmate who was already dying? During a police interview, Holtmeyer made a spontaneous statement. "When I get nervous and excited, I black out and people tell me things I did. I'll probably spend the rest of my life in jail." The district attorney publicly stated he was seeking the death penalty, which would have made Holtmeyer Pennsylvania's first female and third minor to receive a death sentence. The Dots family advised against it, saying life in prison would be worse. At trial in January of 1999, the autopsy showed Dots passed from repeated blows to the head, though the forensic pathologist testified she was dead or in the process of dying from hanging when she was bludgeoned. The defense argued co-defendants were liars who traded outlandish stories for lesser charges. After less than a day's deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on first-degree taking of life, criminal conspiracy, and aggravated assault. On March 24, 1999, Holtmeyer was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the mandatory sentence in Pennsylvania for first-degree offenses at the time. She also received 20 to 40 years for criminal conspiracy to run consecutively. She was 17 years old. Her appellate history spans decades and was shaped by United States Supreme Court rulings. Post-conviction appeals in 2001, 2002, and 2010 were all denied. Then came 2012's Miller v. Alabama, which prohibited mandatory juvenile life without parole. In 2016, Montgomery v. Louisiana made the ruling retroactive. In June of 2017, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that life without parole for juveniles requires proving permanent incorrigibility. On July 27, 2018, a resentencing hearing was held before Senior Judge Daniel L. Hausar. A reentry coordinator at the prison called Holtmeyer one of the best peer support specialists. A psychologist testified about her childhood trauma and that she suffered automatic obedience due to Straw's control over her. The Commonwealth agreed Holtmeyer was capable of rehabilitation. In December of 2018, Judge Hausar resentenced her to 35 years to life for first-degree taking of life, plus concurrent terms for other charges, with credit for time served. This made her parole eligible around 2033. The judge stated, "Without the information on her rehabilitation, I would have had no problem giving her life in prison without parole." In September of 2020, the Pennsylvania Superior Court affirmed the 2018 sentence. As of 2025, Jessica Holtmeyer remains incarcerated at State Correctional Institution at Muncie in Lycoming County, Pennsylvania. She has completed paralegal training, business management courses, and works as a certified peer support specialist and re-entry aide. Her parole eligibility is approximately 2033, when she will be 51 years old. The Dots family has stated they will fight any parole bid. Co-defendant Aaron Straw remains at SCI Dallas, serving life without parole. Miller does not apply to him. He was 18 at the time of the crime. If you're liking this video and you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. We drop new cases every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Lorraine Thorpe. She was 15 years old when she became Britain's youngest female double offender, responsible for taking 2 lives. One of her victims was tortured over the course of 4 days. The other was her own father. Lorraine Thorpe was born in 1994 in Ipswich, Suffolk, England. Her parents, Desmond and Deborah Thorpe, had 4 children and separated when Lorraine was young. She stayed with her father, Desmond, a severe alcoholic who was frail and disabled, unable to walk without assistance. They lived in a series of squalid flats and sometimes in tents. Lorraine became her father's primary caretaker from a very young age, performing intimate care tasks that no child should have to perform. She was diagnosed with ADHD, but stopped taking medication as a teenager. By age 13, she had no formal education. She came to the attention of social services multiple times and was repeatedly placed in specially assigned schools, but always returned to live with her father. By her teenage years, she had become embedded in a group of middle-aged street alcoholics in Ipswich. It was there that she met Paul Clark, 41, an ex-soldier who dominated the group. She looked up to him as a role model. The first victim was Rosalind Hunt, age 41, a member of the street drinking community. In early August of 2009, Clark and Thorpe lured Hunt to Clark's flat. What followed lasted approximately 4 days. They kicked, punched, and stamped on her. They used cheese graters on her skin, then rubbed salt in the wounds. They whipped her with dog-lead chains. They set her hair alight. They broke her ribs. Hunt was eventually taken back to her own flat, where Clark and Thorpe returned days later and inflicted more harm. Her body was found on August 9th, 2009. The second victim was Desmond Thorpe, age 43, Lorraine's own father. After Hunt's passing, Desmond overheard Lorraine and Clark discussing it. He threatened to tell police. Lorraine smothered her disabled father with a cushion while he lay on a sofa, then kicked him. She later told police, "You'll find my trainer prints on his head." Forensic examination confirmed this. His body was found on August 10th, 2009, the morning after Hunt's body was discovered. What does it take for a 15-year-old girl to end the life of the man who raised her, however imperfectly, because he threatened to expose what she had done? Both Thorpe and Clark were charged with 2 counts of taking a life and tried at Ipswich Crown Court. Neither gave evidence during the trial. On August 3rd, 2010, both were convicted. Clark was sentenced to life with a minimum of 27 years. Thorpe's sentencing was delayed until September 7th, 2010, at the Old Bailey, the Central Criminal Court, due to her age. Mr. Justice Saunders sentenced Thorpe to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 14 years detention at Maun. Her Majesty's pleasure. The judge stated that she was responsible for protracted kicking, punching, and stamping on Rosalind. Far from being sorry, the judge said, Lorraine appears to have gloried in it. He added that she found violence funny and entertaining. Regarding her upbringing, he said, to describe it as not being a proper upbringing would be an understatement. In April of 2011, both Thorpe and Clark appealed their convictions for Desmond Thorpe's passing only. The Court of Appeal rejected the appeal, stating they had no doubt the convictions were safe. Co-defendant Paul Clark was found deceased in his cell at HM Prison Whitemoor in September of 2014. It was believed to be self-inflicted. As of 2025, Lorraine Thorpe is incarcerated at HM Prison Foston Hall in Foston, Derbyshire. She became parole eligible in approximately August of 2023, 14 years from the 2009 offenses. In October of 2023, the parole board refused release following a paper review and also refused to recommend a move to open prison. Thorpe declined to take an active role in the review process. The board found her still too high risk, citing her history of finding violence entertaining and stating further work in custody was needed. She is currently approximately 30 or 31 years old. A subsequent oral hearing has reportedly been scheduled for September of 2025. Thorpe's case demonstrates what can happen when a vulnerable child falls under the influence of a violent adult. But the next case involves a young woman who, according to prosecutors, needed no such influence. She acted with deliberate cruelty, and as of this recording, She is the only woman on Tennessee's death row. Krista Pike. She kept a piece of her victim's skull as a souvenir. She showed it off to other students at the Job Corps Center, where both she and the victim had lived. And in September of 2026, if the state of Tennessee carries out her sentence, she will become the first woman executed in that state in over 200 years. Krista Gale Pike was born March 10, 1976, in Beckley, West Virginia. Born prematurely to parents whose marriage would see multiple divorces and reconciliations, she endured extreme neglect from infancy. She was found as a baby crawling through piles of dog feces. Her paternal grandmother was her only stable caregiver, and when the grandmother passed away in 1988, 12-year-old Krista attempted to take her own life for the first time. She was exposed to alcohol in utero, which allegedly damaged the area of her brain regulating impulse control. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and severe PTSD, was dependent on alcohol and marijuana by age 12, and reported multiple instances of sexual molestation. She spent a year in a juvenile facility during 10th grade and completed her GED through the Job Corps program in Knoxville, Tennessee, in late 1994. She was 18 years old at the time of the offense. At Job Corps, she began dating fellow student Tatterell Shipp, who was 17, and the pair developed an interest in the occult. The victim was Colleen Slemmer, age 19, a fellow Job Corps classmate. Pike believed Slemmer was trying to steal her boyfriend, Shipp. Friends of Slemmer denied the accusation. On January 12, 1995, Pike, Shipp, and their friend Shadala Peterson, 18, lured Slemmer to the woods near an abandoned steam plant close to the University of Tennessee campus under the pretense of sharing marijuana. Peterson acted as lookout while Pike and Shipp attacked Slemmer. Over approximately 30 minutes, Slemmer was taunted, beaten, and slashed. A pentagram was carved into her chest with a box cutter. Pike fatally struck Slemmer's skull with a large chunk of asphalt. She then kept a piece of Slemmer's skull as a souvenir, which she later showed off around the Job Corps Center. How does someone walk around displaying a piece of another human being's skull as though it were a trophy? Pike was identified after she began showing the skull fragment to other students. The Job Corps dormitory log showed that Pike, Shipp, Peterson, and Slemmer signed out together, and only 3 returned. All 3 suspects were arrested within 36 hours. Detectives found the skull fragment in Pike's jacket pocket. Pike confessed, but insisted they were merely trying to scare Slemmer, and things got out of control. Shadala Peterson agreed to become a prosecution witness, pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact, and received probation. Tatterell Shipp was tried as an adult despite being 17. Pike was found guilty of first-degree taking of life and conspiracy to commit the same on March 22, 1996, after only a few hours of jury deliberation. On March 30, 1996, Pike was sentenced to death by electrocution for the charges, plus 25 years Isharmal for conspiracy. She became the youngest woman sentenced to death in the United States in the modern death penalty era at age 20. She was 18 at the time of the crime. While incarcerated, Pike accumulated additional charges. In August of 2001, she allegedly attacked fellow inmate Patricia Jones, attempting to strangle her with a shoestring. In 2003, Pike was convicted of attempted first-degree offense and received an additional 25-year sentence. In March of 2012, an escape plot was discovered involving a personal trainer and a corrections officer. Her appellate history is extensive. She launched, canceled, and relaunched state appeals between 1996 and 2008. In June of 2001 and June of 2002, she asked courts to drop her appeal and sought execution by electrocution. An execution date of August 19, 2002 was set, but Pike changed her mind. Appeals in federal court on grounds of ineffective counsel, mental illness, and constitutionality were denied in 2016 and affirmed by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2019. As of 2025, Krista Pike is incarcerated at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Nashville, Tennessee. She is the only woman on Tennessee's death row. On September 30th, 2025, the Tennessee Supreme Court issued a death warrant for September 30th, 2026. If carried out, Pike will be the first woman executed in Tennessee in over 200 years and the 19th woman executed in modern United States history. In January of 2026, Pike filed a lawsuit challenging Tennessee's lethal injection protocol, citing her medical conditions and Buddhist religious beliefs. The case remains pending. Co-defendant Tatterell Shipp was denied parole in October of 2025. Pike was 18 when she took Colleen Slemmer's life. The next case involves a girl who was only 16 when she participated in an act of violence against two children, one of whom was 3 years old. Monique Maestas. A 3-year-old girl lost her life. Her 10-year-old sister's spine was severed, leaving her permanently paralyzed. And the reason? A drug deal gone wrong. $125 worth of what turned out to be salt. Monique Maestas was 16 years old at the time of the offense. Her family history reads like a catalog of dysfunction and trauma. Her father, Harry Maestas, was a twice-convicted individual who spent most of his adult life in Utah prisons. Her mother, Marilyn Maestas, was described as constantly belittling her children and exposing them to drug and alcohol abuse. As children, their parents blew marijuana smoke in their faces to calm hyperactivity. Their father sent ex-convicts from prison to check on the family. One of them molested their sister, Misty, who was 12 at the time. Monique herself was sexually assaulted between ages 9 and 13 by her mother's boyfriend. Her brother, Bo Maestas, was 19 at the time of the crime. The victims were Christiana Cowan, age 3, who did not survive, and Brittany Bergeron, age 10, Christiana's half-sister, who survived but was left permanently paralyzed. Brittany would later become a wheelchair tennis player. Bo and Monique had purchased what they believed was $125 worth of methamphetamine from Robert Schmidt, the boyfriend of the children's mother, Tamara Bergeron. The substance turned out to be salt. Enraged, they returned to the trailer at Casablanca RV Park in Mesquite, Nevada, for revenge. On the night of January 21st through the morning of January 22nd, 2003, at approximately 1:30 a.m., the children's mother and Schmidt were gambling at the adjacent casino, leaving the girls alone. Bo tricked 10-year-old Brittany into opening the door by saying her mother was injured. Both Bo and Monique entered with butcher knives. Both children began screaming. As prosecutors stated, Bo lost it, and they both started using the knives on both girls. One knife got stuck in one child's skull. Christiana, age 3, passed away from her wounds. Brittany survived but was left permanently paralyzed. The pair returned to the car extremely excited and covered in blood, telling their companion Sabrina Bantam, 18, that they had both played an equal part. They fled north on Interstate 15 toward Utah, discarding evidence along the way. What level of rage drives two teenagers to fatally harm a toddler because their drug purchase turned out to be fake? The pair were stopped by Utah Highway Patrol in Nephi, Utah, approximately 250 miles north and about 5 to 6 hours after the attack. Bo confessed immediately. Police recovered the weapons, clothing, and towels from the roof of an abandoned gas station in Fillmore, Utah. Bantam cooperated fully and was not charged. Monique was charged as an adult. Bo pleaded guilty to first-degree taking of life in May of 2005. The first sentencing jury deadlocked, but a second jury in August of 2006 returned a death penalty verdict. Monique pleaded guilty the same day her brother received the death verdict. to offenses against both Christiana and Brittany. Prosecutor Schwartz stated that from his perspective, she deserved to be on death row with her brother, but the United States Supreme Court saved her. He was referencing the 2005 ruling in Roper v. Simmons, which banned capital punishment for crimes committed by those under 18. On October 5, 2006, Monique was sentenced to 47 years to life in prison by Clark County District Judge Donald Mosley. The judge noted she could apply for parole at age 63, approximately 2049 or 2050. He called the case one of the most horrendous he had ever been involved with, a tragedy all the way around brought on by this scourge in our community, narcotics. Monique read a letter of apology directed at survivor Brittany. "I feel in my heart your future will be better, in spite of your disability." As of 2025, Nevada Department of Corrections records list her as out-of-state confinement. Multiple sources report she was transferred to Connecticut Department of Corrections, reportedly at York Correctional Institution in Niantic, Connecticut. Unverified sources claim she was released on parole in 2024, but no mainstream news coverage confirms this. Co-defendant Bo Maestas remains on Nevada's death row with ongoing appeals. Monique Maestas was 16 when she helped take the life of a 3-year-old over $125. The next case involves 2 teenage girls in love who decided the only way to be together was to take the lives of the people standing in their way. Holly Harvey and Sandra Ketchum. She wrote a to-do list in ink on her arm. 4 words. Quote, "Kill, keys, money, jewelry." End quote. Then she and her girlfriend did exactly that, taking the lives of the 2 people who had raised her. Holly Ann Harvey was born in 1989 in Georgia. She was 15 years old at the time of the crime. Her mother, Carla Harvey, was imprisoned on drug charges in April of 2004, at which point Holly moved in full-time with her grandparents, Carl and Sarah Collier, in Fayette County. She had a troubled upbringing with a drug-addicted mother and was described as depressed, writing poetry about wanting to harm others. Sandra Ketchum, known as Sandy, was born April 19, 1988. She was 16 years old at the time. Her father, Timothy Ketchum, married multiple times, and some of his wives were reportedly abusive toward Sandy. The 2 girls met at school and began a romantic relationship that Holly's grandparents strongly disapproved of and actively attempted to end. The victims were Carl Collier, 74, and Sarah Collier, 73. Holly Harvey's grandparents. On August 2, 2004, Sandy had sneaked into Holly's basement bedroom the day before. The girls stayed up listening to music and smoking marijuana, then discussed stealing the grandparents' truck to buy drugs. Holly stated, "We'll have to take their lives to do that." Sandy suggested using knives. Holly retrieved what she described as the biggest knife she could find from the kitchen. She wrote the to-do list on her arm. Kill, keys, money, jewelry. They smoked marijuana in the basement to lure the grandparents downstairs. Sandy hid behind a bed with a knife. When the Colliers came to investigate, Holly stabbed her grandmother Sarah in the back. Carl tried to pin Holly down. Holly stabbed him in the chest. Sandy emerged and stabbed Sarah in the heart, the back of the head, and the arm. Carl retreated upstairs to reach a phone. Holly chased him and ripped the cord from the wall. Carl sustained at least 12 stab wounds. Sarah suffered over 20. Both passed away. The girls stole the truck, took the weapons, and fled. What does it mean when a 15-year-old writes a checklist for taking the lives of her own grandparents? After the events, they stopped at a friend's house to shower and change, then drove approximately 4 hours to Tybee Island on the Georgia coast. They were arrested on August 3, 2004, approximately 17 hours later. Police tracked them partly through Sarah Collier's cell phone. Investigators found a bag containing bloody clothing and knives. Lieutenant Bruce Jordan of the Fayette County Sheriff's Office described Holly as the coldest and most heartless individual he had ever interviewed. He said it almost made her giddy to know they had brought that many people to arrest her. Both were charged as adults with 2 counts of malice taking of life, 2 counts of felony offense, and 1 count of armed robbery. Maximum possible sentence was life without parole. On April 14, 2005, Holly Harvey pleaded guilty to 2 counts of malice offense before Judge Pascal English. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences with parole eligibility after 20 years, approximately 2025. During sentencing, Holly described the crime over 30 minutes while sobbing. When asked why she did it, she said, "For Sandy, so that we could be together." The judge asked if 20 years was a good deal. Holly said no. When asked what should happen, she said, "I think I should be dead." The judge responded, "We both agree on that." Sandra Ketchum pleaded guilty to charges including armed robbery before Judge Johnny Caldwell. She was sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences with parole eligibility after 10 years, approximately 2015. Her hearing lasted less than 10 minutes. As of 2025, Holly Harvey is incarcerated at Lee Arundel State Prison in Alto, Georgia. She became parole eligible in approximately 2024 or 2025. No public reports of parole hearings being scheduled or conducted have been found. Given Georgia's low parole rate for lifers, 4.5% approval in fiscal year 2024, early release appears unlikely. She is currently approximately 36 years old. Sandra Ketchum's current status involves conflicting information. Georgia Department of Corrections records appear to show her as currently serving at Pulaski State Prison. However, third-party inmate tracking sites list her as released on June 21, 2018, approximately 14 years after the crime. This cannot be definitively confirmed from available sources. Holly and Sandra took the lives of Holly's grandparents to be together. The final case also involves 2 teenage girls in a relationship. They also took the life of someone close to them, their best friend. Sheila Eddy and Rachel Showoff. They stabbed her over 50 times. Then they posted on social media pretending to be worried about their missing friend. One of them even posted a tweet that read, quote, "We really did go on 3." End quote. It took 6 months before the truth came out. Sheila Ray Eddy was born September 28, 1995, in Blacksville, West Virginia. Her parents divorced in 2000 when her father suffered a traumatic brain injury. Her mother remarried in 2010, and they moved to Morgantown. Rachel Elizabeth Showoff was born June 10, 1996, in Morgantown. She was raised in a family described as more protective and attended private Catholic school until high school. Both were 16 years old at the time of the crime. Both attended University High School in Morgantown alongside their victim. The victim was Skylar Annette Neese, born February 10, 1996, age 16 at the time of her passing. She lived in Star City, West Virginia, with her parents Dave and Mary Neese. She worked at Wendy's. She was considered one of the best friends of both Eddy and Showoff. Eddy and Showoff were secretly in a romantic relationship. During a 2024 parole hearing, Showoff stated they feared Skylar would out their relationship. She said there were threats made to expose their relationship, and they were scared of that. When initially asked about motive by police, Showoff had stated more bluntly, quote, "We just didn't like her." End quote. The plan was simple. Pick up Skylar at night, drive to a remote area ostensibly to smoke marijuana. Then, on the count of 3, use knives. Other students reportedly overheard Eddy and Showoff discussing the plan, but believed they were joking. On July 6, 2012, at approximately 12:30 a.m., Eddie picked up Skylar from her Star City apartment in her 2006 Toyota Camry. This was captured on surveillance video. The three drove to a remote back road in Wayne Township, Greene County, Pennsylvania, less than 30 miles away. They exited the vehicle. At the count of three, both Eddie and Shoaff inflicted wounds on Skylar Neese, over 50 wounds. Dave Neese later reported that Shelia said she stopped counting after 50. They buried her body in a shallow grave. Both then publicly pretended to be concerned about their missing friend, posting on social media and distributing flyers. Eddie posted tweets later interpreted as taunting references, including the one that read, "We really did go on 3. How do you look a grieving parent in the eye while knowing exactly where their daughter's body lies?" Skylar was initially treated as a runaway because Amber Alert criteria were not met. Surveillance video from a convenience store showed Skylar being picked up. Police identified Eddie's car and interviewed her. She admitted picking up Skylar but claimed she dropped her off an hour later. Cell phone records contradicted this. The FBI and West Virginia State Police joined in September of 2012. Approximately 6 months after the crime, Rachel Shoaff suffered a nervous breakdown. Her mother called 911, and Shoaff could be heard screaming in the background. After psychiatric hospitalization, Shoaff immediately asked to be taken to her lawyer's office. She confessed. In January of 2013, she led investigators to the body. They had Shoaff wear a wire to try to get Eddie to incriminate herself, but Eddie did not admit to anything. FBI analysis found Skylar Neese's blood DNA in the trunk of Eddie's vehicle. The body was recovered on January 16, 2013, in Wayne Township, Pennsylvania. It was identified publicly on March 13, 2013. Rachel Shoaff pleaded guilty to second-degree charges on May 1, 2013. In February of 2014, she was formally sentenced by Monongalia County Circuit Court Judge Russell Clogges to 30 years in prison, with parole eligibility after 10 years. Shelia Eddy was indicted by grand jury for first-degree offense in September of 2013. During court appearances, Dave Neese reported that Eddie looked at him and smiled. On January 24, 2014, Eddie pleaded guilty to first-degree charges. She was sentenced to life in prison with mercy, meaning parole eligibility after 15 years. As of 2025, both are incarcerated at Lakin Correctional Center in Mason County, West Virginia. Rachel Shoaff, age 29, has earned a bachelor's degree in communications and a cosmetology certificate while incarcerated. Her first parole hearing in May of 2023 was denied after over 33,000 people signed a petition opposing release. Her second hearing in July of 2024 was also denied. The board cited a write-up and lack of a home plan. Dave Neese called her nothing but a liar. Mary Neese said evil should not be set free in the world. In June of 2025, Shoaff waived her third eligible hearing, choosing not to appear. Her next eligible hearing is June of 2026. Her mandatory release date, if never paroled, is April 30, 2028. Shelia Eddy, age 30, is serving life with mercy. Her first parole eligibility is May of 2028. She has not yet had any parole hearings. No public statements or communications from her have been reported since incarceration. Skylar's disappearance exposed flaws in West Virginia's Amber Alert system, leading to the introduction of Skylar's Law to modify criteria for issuing immediate public announcements when a child is reported missing and in danger. 10 cases, 10 young women, 10 lives defined by choices made before they turned 20. Some remain behind bars, others walk free. The courts have rendered their verdicts, but the questions these cases raise have no easy answers. Thanks for watching. Click here for the next video.